Welcome to Chapter 17, Operations Management. That's where we put it all together. In operations management, we are going to be looking at understanding what operations management is and how its role has changed over the past 50 years. I'll discuss some key responsibilities of operations managers. I'll describe how operations managers face the special challenges posed by the provision of services. I'll also spend some time explaining how changes in technology have revolutionized operations management, while also describing the strategies operations managers have used to improve the quality of goods and services. And finally, I'll explain how lean and green practices can help both the organization and the environment. So exactly what is operations management? It is managing all of the activities that are involved in creating value by producing goods and services and distributing them to the customers. So it's really looking at how a company manages raw materials and the process with which it is converted into a product and finally it's out the door to a customer. If we take a look back in the 1960s, so some key characteristics of operations management is that there was a strong focus on minimizing the cost, and they also looked a lot at the goods that were being produced. There was a lot of attention paid to mass production, simplifying the supply chain, and really exploiting the environment. There wasn't a lot of concern for how those business practices affected the, the land, the air, the water that the company was around. Well, when we take a look at operations management now, it has shifted. So instead of just focusing on minimizing costs, there's a focus on creating value. There's more emphasis on services, mass customization. So while you still have mass production, there's still the ability to customize pieces of a product for your customer. There's a lot of attention paid to the complex value chain, so looking at how activities add value, and finally, how to have a positive impact on the environment and engaging in practices that are sustainable. Those are all areas that are really the key components to what makes up operation management now. Now, an operation manager, basically, this person provides real critical information and advice during the production design process. So, a manager will look at the process that's required to produce a product and get it to the consumer. And it's important to understand what a process is, and that is a set of related activities that transform inputs into outputs, and it adds value. Operations managers pay close attention to the where, how, and who will perform each of the functions within the process. When a process is being laid out, there's several different elements. One is the product layout. So this is where resources are organized according to a specific sequence of operations that have to be performed. Then there's the process, and the process layout is where you're thinking about the equipment that you're going to be needing for a particular task and having that arranged in a particular format. That makes sense. You have the cellular layout, and that is where different groups of machinery and equipment are organized into self-contained cells, but they're related to each other. So that is why they're in their independent cells. And finally, you have the fixed position layout. And that is where the product or service stays in one place and the employees, machinery, and equipment are brought to the fixed site for its production. So, what are some factors that affect location decisions? So, we have to look at adequacy of utilities. Is there enough electricity or gas? How about the land? Do we have enough space available? What about the labor market conditions? Do we have the right workers available with the right skills? Transportation factors. Is it easy to get to our customers? Is it easy for us to get the supplies that we need? Is appropriate transportation nearby? Quality of life factors. What is the climate like? Are there adequate healthcare facilities nearby? How about the school system? And finally, there's the legal and political environment where companies and operation managers take a look at the local government, and is it supportive of new business or is it anti new business? And are there lots of taxes and fees, and what are the regulations, and how are they different state to state or even country to country? Operation managers take a look at inventory control. And with inventory, we have to consider the stock, how much product of the final product, how much of that is held by other organizations, how much is on hand, and how do we have the pieces that we need in order to make our product. And it's a fine balance. You want to have enough on hand, but you don't want to have too much, and you certainly don't want to run out of something that's important. Some benefits of holding larger inventories: you can have smoother production schedules, you can have protection against stockouts and lost sales, and there's reduced ordering costs. On the opposite side, a cost of holding larger inventory, you can tie up funds that you can have all this money spent on inventory that you don't necessarily need. You have to have additional holding costs or space for the materials. And there's an increased risk that there might be a change in demand, and all of a sudden you have all of the raw materials for a product that for some reason customers don't want. Now, project scheduling. One of the most common practices in scheduling a project is called the critical path method. And what the critical path method does is it illustrates the relationships among all activities, and it identifies the sequence of activities that are likely to take the longest to complete. There is, when we're looking at projects, we have to take a look at activities that must be completed before another activity can begin. This is called the immediate predecessors. And the critical path. This is the sequence of activities that takes the longest to complete. So you may have different pathways and different functions that need to happen to finish a project. But sometimes there's a sequence, a part of it will take longer, and you need to take that into consideration. So to give you an idea of how the critical path is looked at, we're going to consider a play. So when a play is being put together, you have to select the play. You have to get the cast. You have to design the sets, design the costumes, buy materials for the sets, buy material for the costumes, so on and so forth. Using the critical path method, after you've identified all of these different steps, you then come up with an estimated completion time in weeks so that you can develop an overall calendar for this project. And then this is a flow chart that gives a very nice illustration of the network for staging a play. So if we follow from selecting the play, there's 3 different pathways we can take. We have to start selecting the cast. We have to take a look at designing the set and buying the materials and building the sets. And finally, we have to take a look at costumes. What kind of costumes are we going to need? And then the materials need to be purchased. All of these activities need to be running both simultaneously yet independently. Because if you selected your cast but did not spend any time designing your set, when it's showtime, you're not going to have anything there. So it's understanding all of these different processes that have to happen. And at the end of it all, if you look to the right of this graph, you have your rehearsals that take place, and you've got your costumes, you have your set, and everything comes together at dress rehearsal. And after a successful dress rehearsal, the play is performed, and all of those pathways merge together. So at the beginning of the process, they're separated, and they each move down their particular pathway until the end of the project. This is a critical path network. Now, designing and managing value chains. So value chains is a network of relationships that channels the entire flow of inputs, information, and financial resources. And as these resources are reviewed, you end up with the production and distribution of goods and services to a consumer. But the value chain is understanding that particular flow. When we have a vertical integration system, that's where the performance of processes internally that were performed by other organizations in a supply chain. So these are, when we have vertical integration, that's when we as a company start doing that process ourselves. Now, outsourcing, that is where we have other organizations provide supply chain functions that were previously done outside. The United States uses a lot of outsourcing in China, in India, and there's other markets that are continually evolving. And if the labor force is cheaper, if the raw materials are cheaper, companies will decide to produce somewhere else in the world rather than in the United States. That is outsourcing. Offshoring is simply moving a production or support process to a foreign country. So you just move that production there, but the company is still in charge of it rather than, it's different from outsourcing, because outsourcing is where an entirely different organization does the process for you. Outsourcing, you simply move the location, but the company is still in charge. And then you have enterprise resource planning. And this integrates the flow of information amongst all aspects of a single organization's operations. And you need to understand how information moves through an organization so that operations are continually being improved upon. So the differences between goods and services. Goods are tangible. That is the key difference. With a good, you have a physical product. With a service, You don't have a product, but you have an experience. With a good, you can store it, you can put it in a warehouse, you can put it in a store, you can put it in a closet. A service has to be consumed immediately upon being produced. A good can be shipped. Services, it must be consumed where it's provided. A good is produced independently of the consumer, whereas with a service, the service requires the customer to be actively involved in the production. And finally, with a tangible product, a good, there can at least be some aspects of their quality that is determined objectively by measuring defects or deviations. This is very different with a service, which is intangible, and that means that quality is based mainly on customer perceptions. Sometimes you can have a service provider do everything right, but the customer is still upset. And you have to, it's a little bit, it's not nearly as objective. So, but you need to be aware of that. Now in ServiceScape, this is an environment in which a customer and a service provider interact. And when this is being designed, some things that you need to consider is the ambience, so the type of atmosphere that you are trying to provide. You have functionality, and then there's signs, symbols, and artifacts, and thinking about how that influences the service that you are seeking. For example, if somebody wants to go to a massage therapist, well, a massage therapist probably will not give a person a massage with rock and roll blaring and lots of bass. They're going to be using soothing music and soft colors and dimmed lights so that it is indeed a peaceful experience. So depending on the service that's being provided, you need to think about that environment and that experience for your customers. When we're looking at the capacity of a service facility, you have to take a look at the demand and how the services are influenced by the season, day of the week, time of day. If a service facility, if it's too small, you risk unhappy customers. And on the opposite side, if it's too large, it's much more expensive to maintain. So service firms try to spread out demand to avoid major fluctuations. So they do the best that they can to make things pretty even. Now with automation, many jobs that used to be done by human beings are now being done by machines and equipment, and this equipment is being programmed. An example of this is robots. So robots are programmable machines that can manipulate materials, tools, parts, and special devices to perform a variety of tasks. And all of this is programmed through a computer. Some other software technologies that are used when looking at the flow, operations management flow, computer-aided design, also known as CAD. And this is used to create and edit blueprints and design drawings quickly and easily. And this gives managers a chance to play with a flow of a building without going through the expense of building a building and then realizing, oops, we forgot to put in the restroom, or we forgot to put in a storage facility for our finished product. It's a way that you can easily manipulate those blueprints. You have computer-aided engineering, and that is used to test, analyze, and optimize designs. When airplanes or when bridges are built, this is an example of when you might use this type of design. And then you have computer-aided manufacturing, and this uses the electronic design of a product to create programmed instructions that are followed by robots. And these robots are then able to efficiently produce a product, and you're able to keep your human labor costs down. So there's an advantage to using computer-aided manufacturing, or CAM. There's also a combination of the computer-aided, the CAD design with the CAM design, and this is used to design output and send instructions to automated equipment that in turn perform the steps that are needed to produce the output. So it's a nice marriage between the two. And finally, you do have something called SIM, which is computer integrated manufacturing. And this involves using flexible manufacturing systems to automate all the steps involved in designing, testing, and producing a product. And I know in manufacturing, SIM is pretty popular. Now, Edward Deming is considered the father of total quality control, and he really looked at how to move products through a system, quite efficiently. So the goal is to improve the quality, but keep your costs down with fewer reworks, fewer mistakes, and you're trying to do the best job you can the first time out. When you do all that, productivity improves, and you're able to capture the market with a better quality product that is probably cheaper. And that really enables companies to stay in business, and it can also provide jobs. Not only does it refine the current jobs, but it has the potential for even adding jobs as processes are redefined and you find a need for doing something else. So, characteristics of total quality management, of which Deming is considered the father. There's a focus on the customer, an emphasis on building quality throughout the entire organization. You can't have one part of the organization focusing on TQM and most of the company is not. It doesn't work that way. It's an entire organization. There's empowerment of the employees to be recommending changes. And with that, you have a focus on prevention rather than correction. So you're trying to prevent things from happening that don't make sense. So really listening to your employees. And overall, it leads to a long-run commitment to continuous improvement, and it becomes part of the culture of an organization. Now, a poka yoke, that is incorporated into a production process, and it's used to eliminate or greatly reduce errors. So that's another part of TQM that you wanna watch out for those. Now, Six Sigma. With Six Sigma, there are usually very ambitious quality goals. So quality is super important. And to support that quality, there is extensive employee training to make sure that the process is followed correctly. And there's certainly a long-term commitment to working on quality-related issues. Now, When we're looking at quality and initiatives, there's a couple of programs. One is called the Baldrige National Quality Program, and this encourages American firms to focus on quality improvement. There's also the ISO 9000, which is a family of generic standards for quality management systems, and it was established by the International Organization for Standardization, and that is um, looking at TQM from more of a global standpoint, so that when you have a plant in one country, let's say a paper mill, you would expect to find some similar characteristics in a paper mill that is in Germany, for example. One of the growing initiatives, and I I don't see this changing anytime soon, and that is the emphasis on being lean and green. So, lean production puts the emphasis on the elimination of waste in all aspects of the production process. So, you're trying to use everything that you can throughout all of your raw materials so that not only are you not wasting money on resources you don't need, but you're utilizing your resources more efficiently, and that is better for the entire environment that we live in. And we also have just-in-time production, and just-in-time production is where you have the goods are produced just before the actual um, due date. And the reason that this is helpful is, one, it minimizes the need to hold large inventories of finished goods that might not be used or maybe they get damaged. And it works in each in each stage of the supply chain process, so that you are um, using your resources the most efficiently and effectively as you possibly can. Now, green practices, these are carrying out production and distribution processes in an environmentally friendly manner. And the long-term goal is to be sustainable. And we hear a lot about that in the news. And having practices that are not as harsh on the environment, so that we are reducing our carbon emissions and affecting, positively impacting global warming. For the ISO 14000, this is a family of generic standards for environmental management, and it was established by the International Organization for Standardization. So this is the ISO 14000 is a group of firms throughout the world, and they come to some agreements about what how what type of standards should be in place for emissions, so that a plant in China isn't polluting so much that the pollution ends up in the United States. That's not a good practice for the globe. So, working together as a consortium to effectively reduce greenhouse emissions and having practices that the earth can sustain. So, looking back, I've defined operations management and described how the role of operations management has changed over the past 50 years. I've taken a quick look at some of the key responsibilities of operations managers, and also described how these managers face special challenges that are posed by the provision of services. Additionally, I've spent time talking about some of the changes in technology and how they've revolutionized operations management. while also describing the strategies that operations managers have used to improve the quality of goods and services. And finally, we spent just a brief little moment talking about some of the lean and green practices and how they can help both the organization and the environment. So, wow, we have hit the end of the class, and that is, I'm just so proud of all of you. So, what you need to be doing now is wrapping up your careers paper. In addition to that, after you've taken your Chapter 17 quiz, there is a the final, which is like a midterm. It's on chapters 12 through 17. So prepare for that. That is a proctored exam, so make sure that you are planning or giving yourself plenty of time to come onto campus to take that test. As usual, if you have questions, please give me a call, and congratulations, you are almost done. Have a great day.